Good morning. The good heart and the not so good media. We learned in chapter 2 of the Ethics of the Fathers, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 students. And he went and asked them, tell me, what is the characteristic that is most important in creating good character? The first of the students was Rabbi Eliezer, and he said, a good eye. You see things with the correct observation, with no malice and no personal issue. Your reactions will be appropriate, and you will see things clearly and follow the path of truth. Rabbi Yeshua was not so certain about a person being able to figure things out for himself. So he said, get yourself a good friend. When you have a good friend, you talk things over and you'll find the truth that way. Rabbi Yossi the Kohen, who was a pious man, said, you don't need a good friend, you need good examples. Live with good neighbors. In a good neighborhood, you'll see fine, upstanding people, and you want to be just like them. And by mimicking the great, the good, you'll also become great and good someday. Rabbi Shimon, son of Nisanel, said, look and see the result and consequence of all your actions. When you evaluate the consequence of your actions, you'll always do the correct thing. And Rabbi Elazar, son of Aruch, said, you need to have a good heart. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was most impressed with the good heart, because the good heart is the source of the other things. What is a good heart? Having a correct motivation, looking and being motivated to find the truth and to follow the truth and to be part of the truth. A good heart is something that, a trait that looks to find goodness wherever it can find it. And it looks for the proper path. It looks to be part of the proper path. It doesn't want to injure or hurt anyone. So the good heart will look with a good eye. Will seek out good friends, live among the righteous, and discern what the results will be of one's action. Now the question is, how come this great rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, whose ideas were more encompassing, were deeper than the ideas of his contemporaries, why is he rarely found in the writings of the Mishnah or in the Aggadic literature in the Talmud? If he was so great, what happened to him? So the Talmud tells us what happened. His wife wanted a vacation, got him to stay for a short period of time at a resort where he drank what appears to be natural Perrier water, bathed in the baths of luxury, and eating luxurious food. What was the interval? I don't know, but there must have been some pressing issue for which she wanted some kind of diversion. It might have been after the death and the passing of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, where they had to reorient themselves, or some other event. But nonetheless, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach was affected by this permanently. He came back to the academy an emotional cripple. His motivation was no longer the same motivation. And the rabbis prayed on his behalf and he was restored somewhat. But we lack the number of halachas, the number of insights, and that we lack the clarity of thought to pervade the annals and the pages of the Mishnah and the Talmud in his name. Apparently, he was never the same. And the question is why? If he was properly motivated, if he had the proper heart, what happened? What happened is self-interest. When you're worried about number one and satisfying the needs of number one, the good heart gets tainted. You can use all of the arguments and all of the insights to protecting number one, looking out for number one. One can be a pious Baal Musar, or even a great Chosid, and still you look out for number one, because the person's core has been tainted by this need of self-protection and self-concern. And it is very, very insidious. It lies at the core of the person, and it's almost impossible to root out. Today's media thinks themselves to be sincere purveyors of the truth. In fact, there was an article by someone in the New York Times explaining why his critique of Donald Trump is so much more than the critique of Hillary Clinton, because there's so much more that Donald Trump gives them. He's so much worse than Hillary. Now this, from a person who's doing an act of self-evaluation. But the facts ring loud and ring true. As a child, I grew up in New York, and all the secular books were the textbooks that were given to the public schools. All of those books were written by socialists. Socialists who believed in the New Deal politics, who criticized the Republicans, or didn't even have the Republicans as anything important in the course of American history. With those biases, we grew up, became college students. Naturally, we were going to vote Democrat, despite the fact that the Democratic Party had a history of corruption, a history of bigotry, much worse than the Republicans. But because the Democrats at that time had taken upon themselves the mores of the socialists, that covered up all of their ills. The journalists who are in the media primarily grew up and studied in schools whose teachers were socialists. That happens to be a fact. Most of the professors believed in socialism. The Clintons, Obama, the great leaders of the Democratic Party were taught by professors who were basically socialists, and perhaps even worse. Journalists were influenced by their professors and by the textbooks. And were rewarded for their activities by the same people with these same ideas. So much so that the true good heart that is clear and untainted from any kind of prejudice does not exist in the media. There are people who've done evaluations, just as an example. The Kaiser Khan, who was a Pakistani whose son was killed in action in 2005, is basically a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was given 9, 10, 15 minutes by some of the major outlets, NBC, CBS, while the mother of one of those who was killed in Benghazi was given a couple of seconds, 15 seconds on one, a couple of seconds on the other. They were there around the same time. They spoke at the opposite ends of the conventions, but they don't mention the one that spoke for the Republicans, not anywhere near as the one who spoke at the Democratic convention. This has got nothing to do with how Donald Trump is worse and gives you much more stuff to talk about. It has to do with the bias. Both parents lost this child. Why is one being given hundreds of times more time? Got nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has everything to do with bias. And you don't even realize that you're biased. And that's the problem. You've been raised, nurtured, rewarded, your job, the money that's come from the various sources, all of those promoting one agenda. In the process, your values, your good heart has been tainted. It is almost impossible for a student coming out of school to not be tainted and favoring the socialist message and therefore the democratic message, at least in the media. It's almost impossible. 90% are pro-Democrat. That's been the way it's been for many years. And the reason for it is, as I've articulated, textbooks, teachers, scholarships, rewards, all of these things mold the persons to the subconscious effect that the good heart is no longer there. There is no true discernment. And just like the great Elazar ben Aruch, even the most discerning, the most sincere, the most well-balanced of minds and hearts are tainted. And that's why the media has to be purged. And people out there really should not look at the media for their information, because all of the information, unfortunately, is tainted. You have to take everything with a grain of salt. And we have to be more like the students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who understood that Rabbi Elazar was compromised, and they prayed on his behalf and restored him, at least somewhat restored. We have to pray for the media, that somehow or other they should be restored to some sense of balance, some sense of equal footing for competing ideas. Until then, you have to understand that the good heart is non-existent in public media today.